Warm greetings and hearty welcome to the C3S Conversation on the book Dying for an iPhone, Apple, Foxconn, and the Lives of China's Workers with Shri M.R.Sivaraman IAS retired. Our guest for today, Shri Sivaraman Sir, is a doyen in the field of economics, and Sivaraman Sir is the perfect choice for the discussion of this book, Dying for an iPhone. A 1962 batch IAS officer of the Madhya Pradesh cadre, he served as the revenue secretary who transformed the excise and custom duty structure of India. He was also instrumental in introducing the PAN in income tax and started the computerization of the functioning of Central Excise and Customs of India. Mr. Sivaraman also served as ED IMF in Washington, D.C., with the rank of Ambassador of US during 1996 to 1999. Mr. Sivaraman is also a qualified pilot. As DGCA of India, he was responsible for opening the Indian skies to the private sector and taking many steps in improving the training of pilots and safety of airports in India. Mr. Sivaraman has published innumerable articles on fiscal and monetary policy issues in books and newspapers. He is also a popular reviewer of contemporary books on economics and environment in the International Journal of Environmental Studies, published by Taylor and Francis of the UK. Thank you so much, sir, for agreeing to be part of this conversation today. And before we begin the session, I would like to give a brief introduction on the book Dying for an iPhone. This book, written by Jenny Chan, Mark Selden, and Pun Ngai, brings out the dark human cost of the exploitative production mechanisms employed by the two of the world's most powerful companies, Apple and Foxconn. Drawing on testimonies from rural migrant employees, student interns, managers, and other staff, the book is a devastating expose on the practices of Apple and Foxconn. As a leading manufacturer of iPhones, iPads, and Kindles, and employing around 1 million workers in China alone, the Taiwanese-invested Foxconn's drive to dominate global electronics manufacturing has aligned perfectly with China's goal of becoming the world leader in technology. This book reveals the negative consequences of such an ambition on the Chinese workers and what our demand for the newest and best technology means for them, which is nothing short of suicides, overtime, violence, and hostility on the factory floor. Foxconn workers have repeatedly demonstrated their power to strike at key nodes, but to no avail. Dying for an iPhone in a larger picture allows us to assess the impact of global capitalism's deepening crisis on workers. With this introduction, I would like to begin the session for today. Sir, the book elaborately discusses about the suicides committed by the Chinese workers and all the exploitation that they go through. So, can you give us a brief introduction and your thoughts on the whole issue and on the book?
This book actually exposes the dark side of capitalism and the dark side of the Chinese economy. What has surprised me after reading the book is that while the WTO is quick to point fingers at India if it starts giving some subsidy or some help to exporters from India, or, for example, countries like United States take India to the tribunal for giving some kind of a concession, none of these countries have ever bothered to point fingers at China because they seem to be benefiting from China. Because these companies, which are world leaders like Apple or GE or other Cisco systems or others who are using Foxconn, they do not want to raise any issue about the exploitation of the labor there, about the subsidies, the grants, the facilities, the free land, everything that is being given by the Chinese state or by the local governments to companies like Foxconn in China. So this is what surprises me. Why is the WTO then in existence? Why are these tribunals in existence? Why they point fingers only at India? When you read this book, I'm sure that WTO people would have read this book also. And why such a discrimination is taking place as far as India is concerned in regard to export matters. Apart from that, if you take the International Labour Organization, none of them seems to have pointed out anything against China in regard to this. None of them seems to have taken issues with the Apple or Cisco or whoever is using Foxconn. But if anything happens in India, they go out into the public sphere and start criticizing India. Child labor that is taking place rampantly in China, as you would have seen in the book itself. But nothing has been said about it in International Labour Organization or anywhere else about China. So there seems to be some kind of a collusion between China and some other Western countries in regard to the way in which they are getting benefits from China, and China is growing prosperous, or rather seemingly prosperous.
Yeah, very true, sir. And so, like I mentioned in the introduction, the book, and like you also said, the book exposes the world's most two powerful companies, that is Foxconn and Apple. And if we see the company, its aim to become the technology superpower in the world, it also aligns with China's goal of becoming the world leader in technology. So, with this context, how do you see the impact of global capitalism's deepening crisis on workers and their basic rights? Do you see this only confined to China, or is there a global trend happening in other places as well?
We do not know, because if you look at the Industrial Revolution in the United Kingdom, or if you read the books by David Copperfield, etc., and David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, this is what happened in the United Kingdom also. When it started industrialization, child labor being used, and the laborers being exploited, dungeons were being created for laborers, and then slowly and slowly things started improving in the United Kingdom. But in the case of China, it has not improved. But I just looked into some statistics relating to China. Seemingly, China has got the largest all trade union federation in the world, consisting of 302 million members. There are 173,000 trade unions in China, spread across 31 regions and 10 national industrial there are 10 national industrial unions. Seemingly, China seems to be following the ideal of Marxism, that they have got laborers all united. But the laborers have not been able to get through anything in China. As an example, there is an incident of a strike that has been given in this book itself. On 23rd September 2012, Taiwan plant of Foxconn, 80,000 workers struck work against not being paid 130 yuan a month as overtime. They smashed everything, just as it happened in Winston or here. And the Chinese government mobilized 5,000 policemen with riot gear to suppress this agitation. And nothing happened. People got injured. Nothing happened in China. Excepting that, these people suffered injuries, and the Foxconn probably suffered from some kind of damages, which they might have recovered from the wages of the workers. So, Foxconn workers are also fully unionized, but they are totally voiceless. Because the moment a union starts demanding wages, the managers start negotiating it. And the managers are ruthless in regard to their bargaining with the workers, and the workers get nothing, excepting that some small, a couple of yuans here or there, or some facilities here or there. So this trade unionism is again a facade. Probably the world is enamored by these numbers, and that is why WTO is not pointing any finger at China, but it points fingers at India. And therefore, if we look at capitalism's dark side, or whether it is happening anywhere else, let us take India itself. I don't think in India any such thing is happening, because we are a democratic country and these things will come out very fast. If it is happening in Vietnam, I can't say. Whether it is happening in Bangladesh, yes, in Bangladesh, you have already heard the news of, there was a major accident in a factory, but almost 10,000 people died. And I have been to Bangladesh. I have seen some of these factories, crowded factories, people work there. They say in Surat also, in some other diamond units, there is hardly any space for the workers who are cutting the diamonds. But if you look at Surat, the workers are very well paid. They are very, very well looked after. These Surat, some of the diamond merchants give them flats free, give them cars free. So Surat itself has got a per capita income over $13,000. So they are paid well. But the working conditions, I am not very sure whether they are really good or very hospitable for the workers' health. So these things may be happening. I'm not sure whether they happen in Latin American countries. In Mexico also, I believe it happens in some other Nike factories and other places, but not in the developed countries, but not in India also. There may be stray instances of, labor servitude or slave labor in India, but I don't think the factories are so badly off as in China in regard to treatment of laborers.
Okay. So upon reading the book, we find that this, on a larger picture, this book offers a sophisticated study on the development of capitalism, whose key is the control of labor, like you mentioned, which was actually expounded by Marx years earlier. So, with this literature, how do you see China and Chinese workers under the Communist Party of China?
No, in regard, you see, look at it's a very strange phenomenon in China. So over the years between 1978, 79, you can say till about the beginning of 94, 95, China exploited this labor fully. China was able to suppress labor, repress labor, create that surplus value, which is given there in Marx's book, Labor Theory of Surplus Value, where surplus value is generated by the labor and it is exploited by the state. In the case of Foxconn, you would have noticed Foxconn gets a pittance. It's Apple which is getting 58.5% of the gross revenue of any cell phone that is sold. Foxconn is getting a pittance, but still, as the numbers are so huge, 300,000 people are accommodated in one single factory, Foxconn is able to generate huge amounts of revenue also. Foxconn's the total turnover today is $200 billion. And its profitability vis-a-vis the total turnover may not be that high. So therefore, you see, as far as the capitalism is concerned, you see only the dark side of capitalism exposed here. But capitalism is fully there in China because large enterprises are there, huge mechanized production is there. So Foxconn itself is using probably 40,000 robots in their factories, different factories. Foxconn is the Terry Gou was the chairman of this company. You must give credit to him. He is probably one of the greatest intellectuals one can see, starting from a small unit. He has built up an empire which is one of the largest in the world and which spreads across from pin to an aircraft carrier. He manufactures everything. And it is reported that Foxconn commanded nearly 46,000 patents across the world. He purchased all the patents. He might have purchased patents in India also. That shows the cleverness of the person. That shows the bright side of capitalism. That is, people are trying to use whatever is invented, whatever is generated in other parts of the world for purposes of building up richness. So that is what Terry Gou has done. Whether he himself is a rich man, one does not know. Now he has stepped down, I believe. Somebody else has taken over as chairman, and the chairman has reportedly visited India. Now, from the point of view of Foxconn itself, let me say, in India also they are employing 22,000 people. And they have said they will employ 100,000 people within the next 2 or 3 years. They are going to invest $1.6 billion here in Chennai. They are going to invest. So that means Foxconn has also got a brighter side. That is, Foxconn also want to show that in places like India also they can survive with all its labor laws, labor regulations, etc., etc. Now Foxconn has joined hands with Vedanta. They are going to invest $22 billion in Maharashtra. And yesterday Vedanta chairman said that they will go on stream within the next 2 years and provide direct and indirect employment from more than 100,000 people there itself. So Foxconn has also got a brighter side. So that way you will see capitalism is operating at different levels as far as Foxconn is concerned.
Okay, thank you, sir. And sir, like you just mentioned, the book presents fascinating insights into the structure of China's export manufacturing economy. So, as quoted in the book, to quote some data, Foxconn has massive revenues of over 100 billion US dollars, but it operates at a very thin profit margins, which is a major factor in its worker exploitation. Meanwhile, the iPhone is manufactured in China. The cost of the labor, it represents only 1.8% of an iPhone's retail price, like you
Yes.
just mentioned. So, does reforms would it make a huge difference when it comes to labor cost and all, reflecting in the production cost? Can you please share your insights on this
See, as far as
aspect?
reform is concerned, whether if Foxconn increases the wages to its workers, you must remember one thing. As far as Foxconn is concerned, at one particular point of time, they were, I don't know about now, they were employing 150,000 interns. What does it mean? They were taking away boys and girls at a tender age of 15 and 16 from the schools, and they were sending them to the Foxconn factories. And what were they doing, these boys and girls? One boy would be just screwing. Only one screw he will put. Another girl will probably inspecting the screen, whether there is any scratch, minute scratch or something. That's what is written in the book. So there are 100 operations as far as iPhone is concerned. Each one is very minute. And individually taken, it is not of very high technical skill required. Whereas these boys and girls were exploited, They were not given the wages which they were being paid to the other laborers who were coming from rural areas and were permanent workers. And these boys and girls were not being given any labor benefits. They were not being given any facilities they were not to stay properly. They were not being given any holidays. So Foxconn was able to generate its own margin by suppressing the wage component of their entire operations by employing this labor. Who collaborated with them? The government collaborated with them. Chinese government collaborated. The local provincial government collaborated, because all these interns came from the government-sponsored industrial training institutes. That way, you must give credit to China, and India has not learned this lesson from China, because China at one particular point of time had 50% of its student population in vocational education. 22 million students were there in vocational education. They were all being trained to join the workforce in various factories. It's a different thing that they were being underpaid. When once they come out to the factories as trained workers, they may be joining the regular workforce. Whereas in India, we have not learned that lesson from China. We are not even asking children to join the vocational course, which are available even in the central schools or in many schools that is available. That is one major lesson which India is also to learn from China. And so when you talked about the margin, 1.8% of the margin only they are getting. But nevertheless, Foxconn may be getting some extra profit because they are employing the students in many of the operations relating to production of Apple or iMac or iPad or whatever it is.
Okay. So, like you also mentioned, we see Foxconn is also moving its manufacturing units to other countries. Like in India, also they have set up their plants, and also they are even moving to the U.S. state of Wisconsin. So, when they are actually moving away from China, do you see them changing their labor practices and all that?
I'm
What is
not
your take on
sure
that, sir?
about that, because I think they are moving away because number one, they might have been they may be getting saturated in the United States, in China with all their operation. They're spread over all the provinces. They're employing more than 1 million people in China itself. And they may be finding it a little difficult because of a lot of resistance coming from the labor. Already they are getting over this resistance. Secondly, they also want to have a good appearance before the world, that they are such a large company. They must also have an image. And that image they are building by having a factory in Wisconsin, having a factory in India, maybe in some other country also they will be having these factories. So they can always say that here, look at this, we are having a factory in USA, we are having factories in India. So that way they are trying to balance what they are doing in China and what they will be doing in India.
Okay. So you mentioned that the IMF and WTO and other international organizations, they are not doing anything to fix this labor issue that's been happening in Chinese plants of Foxconn. What do you think is the way forward? How can this kind of exploitation be reduced or minimized or even taken away? Like, what is your way ahead?
See, let me tell you one thing. As IMF is concerned, they are not concerned with this at all. As far as WTO and ILO, they are concerned with this. Because WTO has been tolerating this for the last 25, 30 years, when China has been growing at a furious pace at 12% to 13% per annum. How could they grow? Because they were able to attract all these industries into China, all these capitalist industries, whatever you may say, Nike, GE or Cisco, whatever it is, they all moved into China, because it is only in China they could see that the labor could be exploited, that the labor could be suppressed, that labor could be paid much less than the United States, probably 2% or 3% of the way that is being earned by a United States unskilled worker is being earned by a skilled worker in China. So they also found this thing very easily. That is why if anything happens in China, anything against the labor, anything against the normal rules and regulations of the international order, they never complained. They never come. Whereas in the case of India, if you give some subsidy to the cotton farmer who's dying because his cotton has been grown in surplus and is not finding a market, immediately they go to WTO and there is a decision against China, India. Why the government of United States have not filed a petition against Foxconn? Because Apple is generating $1 trillion revenue or $1 billion revenue every day. So they will not go. It's a dark side of the nation's behavior also. And whereas India itself should have taken up this issue when they fought in the WTO tribunal, a case against India by the United States in regard to cotton and many item, they should have asked the WTO, what are you doing about China? They never asked this question. Because let me say, in India also, we have been saying that we will move away from China, but every year, imports from China is increasing.
Yeah.
Who is to be blamed? Indian capitalists to be blamed, Indian consumer to be blamed. Indian capitalists, the air conditioner that are still working in my house, they were stamped Lloyd's air conditioner, but made in China. Godrej air conditioner, they have closed down the factory, made in China. So who is responsible? Our own capitalists are responsible.
Yeah.
So world over, you see the capitalists are responsible for propping up China, for developing China. And now there is no point in saying China is hand in glove with Russia and they are fighting in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
It is a creation. You create a Frankenstein and you say, I'm afraid of the Frankenstein, that it may gobble me up.
Sir, and also it's just an insight that I had while reading the book. You see how beautifully what Marx has said so many years earlier, it's actually coming true in all these cases, be it the surplus value of labor and all the other exploitation that he's mentioned. While reading the book, you see that it's actually happening and it actually is coming true in this world at this point in time. So how do you see this, sir? Like when connecting the theory to this book and the situation that's been happening?
There is always a surplus value. When you are working, there is always a surplus value. Take for example yourself. You were educated in England. You have been educated in the best of colleges. What is your salary? And you look at your own, a friend of yours working in a company. What is his salary? When I am working in government, what is my salary? When I left New Delhi as Secretary to Government of India, the net carry-home pay of mine was 6,000 rupees. 6,000. I put my last pay certificate in the internet also to everyone. Nobody wants to look at it because that is the reality. And at that particular point in time, what is a driver getting in the private sector? 15,000 rupees a month. What a Secretary to Government of India, Revenue Secretary getting in charge of, say, $200 billion of revenue or $100 billion in the time? 6,000 rupees. So there is an exploitation. So exploitation takes place in different forms. There is always a surplus value. Whenever a person is employed, there is a surplus value. Without the surplus value, a company cannot thrive. So how does the surplus value get generated after the labor? After all, who produces anything? It is a labor. So when you look at the GDP, what is GDP? Interest, wages, and profits. That is GDP. So it is a payment. So you exclude interest and profit. Wages constitute the major component of the GDP. So unless there is an exploitation of wage in the wage sector, you cannot pay the interest sector or the profit. So ultimately, it's true. The machines are required. Where there are no machines, there is only human labor is employed. When human labor is producing everything, again, it is a surplus value generated by labor that goes for profit and interest.
That's so beautifully put, sir. So thank you so much for this session and thank you so much for sparing your time and having this conversation on the book with us. So we look forward to many such conversations with you, sir, in the future.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir.